If you go back to the years just before the internet was created in the late 80s and very early 90s, and then during the 90s in the period that led to the creation of companies like Google, there was a widespread ideology that everything involving information will be done on a volunteer basis and shared, and advertising would be the only business plan. For instance, there are a bunch of people who believe we would never have commercially produced television or movies. It would all be created through volunteers self-organizing over the internet. I want to point out something. You're familiar with the company Netflix? You're probably familiar with the company HBO. I suspect you've heard of a company called Amazon. All right, these are just a few examples of companies that ask people to pay for TV and movies. And what's happened is we've entered into a period that in the United States we call peak TV, the best TV ever. Previously, TV was often paid for by advertisements. Now people pay for their TV and we call it peak TV. So when you pay for something, all of a sudden it gets better. Why? Because you're the customer in that case instead of the product. But the thing is, there was this assumption that you could only have a totally closed, packaged commercial system where nobody knew anything, nobody saw anything. One company owned the whole thing and sold it for whatever they wanted to, and it was totally controlled. Or you'd have this totally open world where nobody would be paid and everything would be volunteer, and the only options were service contracts or advertising, some kind of after-the-fact service. That would be it. But there is a third option. Those are not the only two options. You could have a world where the code is revealed, it's open, people can add to it, and then as anyone runs the code, it generates royalties to whoever wrote a particular piece of it. So if there's a particular piece of internet code that's run a lot, the people who wrote that code would get rich. And if there's a dispute about authorship or something, there are ways to resolve that. And there'd be a huge chain since many people would contribute, so there would be hundreds of thousands of people getting a royalty from popular code being run. This is a doable world. There's no technical or theoretical impediment to creating this world. And this would create like a middle class of people contributing to code. It's not necessarily the case that all code should be that way. But the thing is, this assumption that either everything is totally closed or totally open is false. There's a third option, which is open but monetized.